we've decided to hold this event in English because there might be faculty members or researchers from your institutions who don't speak German. So we'll do it in English, but then in the discussions, in the Q&As, you can also ask your questions in German. This is also possible. So yeah, welcome from my side to our event on funding instruments supporting international collaboration. My name is Florence Balthasar, and I'm the head of international affairs at Zurich University of the Arts. I'll start with a few logistic boring points, but important. So you've noticed we are recording the event, and the idea is to put the recording at disposal of people we know couldn't attend today, but are interested in the content. So I hope it's fine with you. You had to accept it anyway to be here. If you then want to ask questions, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself to ask the question. So with the raise your hand button, if you can do something, and that is to specify the name of the institution. So you go on your profile and click on the small dots, and then you can rename yourself. So you can just add whether you're from the University of Zurich, ZHdK, ETH, I mean, all the institutions who are present here. And because it's a lunchtime event, do not hesitate to eat. You don't have to switch off your camera for that. It's totally fine. So this event is a joint collaboration between all higher education institutions in Zurich and Movetia. So we have participants from the international offices of the respective institutions, but also from the research office or your research offices, as well as faculty members and researchers from our institution who might be interested to hand in a project proposal in the future. So that's very concretely about that. The idea is to learn about two specific instruments, the cooperation partnerships of Erasmus+ and the international programs of Movetia. So Movetia is the Swiss agency that actually promotes and manages those instruments. So that's why we have our first speaker, Julia Grünenfelder, who is program coordinator at Movetia. And we will first hear from her about those specific instruments. We'll then have the possibility to ask clarifying questions to Julia just after her presentation. And then we will hear from two existing projects running, one at Zurich University of the Arts and the other one at the University of Zurich. We have Patrick Müller and Dina Pomeranz with us today. Thank you so much. So Patrick Müller is a professor at our Master of Arts in Transdisciplinary Studies and also active in the Institute for Computer, Music and Sound Technology at ZHdK, Zurich University of the Arts. And Dina Pomeranz is Assistant Professor of Applied Economics at the University of Zurich. So that's about it for today. At the end, we will discuss whether we can, I mean, we as international offices can do something more to support you, or whether the very concrete questions from people who would like to apply for next year. So we will we'll have this discussion. It's an informal round. We are not many. So we will see what directions the discussions and the questions take. But to start with, I'd like to give the floor to Julia Grünenfelder for her short overview of the instruments. Julia.
Thank you very much, Florence, for the welcoming words and also for initiating this exchange. Today I have let's say a very small role. I will very briefly present our funding instruments, but not so much concrete details. We can follow up with this later on. What I find is really exciting about this event are the two examples. They will provide much more flesh to the bone of what we understand with a cooperation project in education. And here maybe, exactly, Valérie, thank you for starting. So still Erasmus Plus and international collaboration in education is very frequently still associated with mobility. If you can switch to the next slide. But what we do, just to come to the basics, is in international collaboration for higher education, we as a funding agency support or fund institutions to run mobility projects or cooperation projects. So these are the two big project types that we distinguish. Both of them have different logics. While mobility targets more the development of individual competences and motivation, the cooperation project is really about bringing forward the institution, the educational offer, or even, and that's the most impressive and probably also the most difficult, is the contribution to the Swiss education area. All in all, of course, it's about the quality of education and the attractiveness of the educational offers at home in Switzerland, but also about the visibility and recognition of Swiss education abroad. I hope this, for the newcomers, I don't know who has never heard about our offers, this should help you to navigate. Today we are only talking about cooperation projects. We will stay within this logic. If you have questions about mobility things, we can discuss this in another setting. So if you can go to the next slide, Valerie, thank you. Here, it's actually a summary of what I just said for the cooperation projects. I always underline that the funding that we distribute comes from the Swiss budget for education, research and innovation. So it's targeted to benefit the Swiss institutions, the Swiss system. In this sense, it should create, or projects that you run should create an added value for Switzerland. Can mean the educational offer institution or the Swiss education system as a whole. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, that looks a bit strange. I'm sorry for this. On this slide, you can see an overview of our main funding instruments. The first one is only for Switzerland. It's the National Exchange for Teachers in Training. There are also formats for collaborative projects, but this is for University of Teacher Education only, and I will not talk about this today. What's probably more relevant is the two other funding instruments, the Swiss program for Erasmus+, the cooperation projects. With this one, you as an institution or collaborator, you can participate in an Erasmus Plus project, respecting all the Erasmus Plus rules, of course. And you can ask for most of these instruments to cover your expenses or to contribute to your expenses with a grant that we give you. Now they're called the most important instrument are the cooperation partnerships. Formerly they were called strategic partnerships, and the first project example that we will hear today is from this type of project. So I will not go into the details because you will hear this example and how it works afterwards. Our international program is an opportunity to have Swiss-led international projects in education. Because in the Erasmus Plus program, Swiss institutions are not eligible to lead projects. And this is kind of our backup scheme. And here you can collaborate with just another institution from abroad in Europe or even beyond. And the second project example today is a project that was funded or is still funded under the international program. Here on the side, you can see that Movetia can finance up to 60% of the effective costs, means personal costs, mobility costs, and other costs. So you can really cover the work that you're doing. You can even employ some assistant to help in the project. Next slide, please. Some of you might know that we just closed, let's say, the round 22 for the international program. I decided to focus in these last slides on the international program because if you run a project, you submit it, it's probably more likely that you will submit to this funding program. So I would like to give you some details about this round. The deadline was in the end of March, and we just sent out the decisions last week, I think. So the project participants should by now know whether they receive funding or not. This international program, we offer it for all the different education sectors. So for school education, adult education, higher education, extra curricular youth work. And for all the sectors, we had 3 million Swiss francs in total. So in this call 22, the competition increased compared to the pilot program that we implemented in 18 to 20. We have received many projects. Some could be better or were not very good, but many of them were of a relatively high quality, and we could not fund all of them. We would have liked to fund more projects. Here you can see the evaluation criteria that we applied, and you can see that most important is the relevance of the project and the impact and results. Of course, that's all what you write in your application. So the project application was evaluated based on what you submitted. For higher education, we received a total of 26 projects, and in total 57 applications, and they asked for more than 6 million Swiss francs. And we had 3 million available. I think it was around 1 million for higher education. In total, we could support around 30 projects, 14 in higher education. And so we could only fund about every second project in higher education. What is probably most relevant for you are some indications about decisive elements for rejections and for high scores. So for rejections, these were often that they were rather classic development aid. So the added value for Switzerland was not convincingly argued. Some of them were too mobility oriented and didn't properly explain what is the benefit for the institution, the educational offer, or the Swiss system. And some had too high costs for work that is not in the focus of the international program. For example, very high costs for digitizing something, for building up IT infrastructure, etc. What were the decisive elements for high scores? And here the ambitions were high. So high scores, cross-sectoral collaboration, or an added value for several sectors. We had, for example, several projects who wanted to have an impact on the tertiary education, school education, and even youth sometimes, or tertiary education and vocational education and training. What was also very beneficial was that it was deemed highly probable that the institution, as a whole institution, would engage and buy into the project, so that it was not something isolated and no one else in the institution knew about this project, but that there was a bit more and the involvement of several departments or several sections. We also had projects with formal national collaboration, so within Switzerland, above all across linguistic regions. For example, the SUPSI and the Ticino partnering up with the University of Teacher Education in the Valais, and they partnered again then with the UK university. And also when you had institutions involved with fewer than average international activities. This was, for example, in the school sector, very relevant, but also in tertiary education, for example, institutions that offer higher vet education at tertiary level and did not have any internationalization at all. And then was also beneficial when we considered the project to have an impact on the further internationalization of the institution and the offer. So these are a few hints on what we had in this call, and which might hopefully help you preparing a project for the next call. Maybe on a more political level, currently the budget for education, research and innovation 2025 and 2028 is being prepared. Even though I said that the competition is increasing and it might be more difficult for you to get a project through, but it's still very helpful if you engage in our funding programs, that you show your interest, that we have arguments why we need money for internationalization in education in the next budget round in Switzerland. And what's also helpful that you show, once you have received funds from us, that you make it visible, you also share it within your institution, you display that you received funding from Movetia on your website. So the whole visibility issue, this is also very helpful, that we can secure good funding for the next years. Then I'm already running late, I think, but I have just one slide left, if I'm right. Here I put some resources. We still have some application deadlines in 2022, which are only participation in Erasmus Plus projects. And then we are already preparing for the 23 applications. There, we hope to have a similar schedule as now, with an application deadline probably in spring 23 for the international program, and also for the new deadlines for the participation in the Erasmus Plus project. For the experienced people in our programs, you might have seen on one of the previous slides that I said Movetia finances up to 60% of effective costs. So we have new legal baselines, and this will also change a little bit for the participation in the Erasmus Plus projects. We are currently adapting the funding model to make it very similar, or actually the same as we have for the international program. We will work with a work package structure and effective costs. So you will not have any more the contributions to individual actions or activities when you participate in an Erasmus Plus program, but you can ask for contributions to actual costs. We plan to have an online info event on the 2023 rules on the 21st November. So we hope to give you all the details on the new things in November. This is now really intended as a launch for that you can get inspired, come up with new project ideas, search for project partners, and then go ahead for the next deadlines. At our side, it's Maria Sergiu and myself whom are here to answer your questions. You can always contact us. And I think that's it from my side. I give back to Florence.
Thank you, Julia. That was a good overview to start with. I've announced it earlier. If there is, or there are a few clarification questions to Julia, we would take them now. Otherwise, Julia, of course, is staying for the discussions and will actively bring herself into the discussions when we get the project examples. But if you have a question now, just raise your hand. Or just take the floor. I'm checking the hands. I don't see anything, so I suggest we move to the first project example. Like Julia said, there's nothing better than seeing what we can concretely do with those funding schemes. So in that sense, Patrick, I would give you the floor for you to shortly in 10 minutes present your project, what it is about, whom do you cooperate with, did you face any challenges, and what are the benefits actually from participating in this project?
Okay, thank you, Florence, for the invitation and the opportunity to kind of share some of the experiences. Yes, and thank you, Valerie, for being here and sharing the slides. So the project I'm going to talk about is about as Julia has mentioned, the Erasmus Plus strategic partnership, or as it is called now, if I understood correctly, cooperation partnerships. Its title is Exploring Transdisciplinary Education Combining Arts and Sciences. I will come back to the contents a bit later and just present first who we are working with. So there are, it's a consortium of 6 or 7 universities in Europe, all of them, of course. And perhaps I can tell a little bit how we kind of were integrated into the initiatives that came actually out from a context of a consortium of 3 universities in Rotterdam, Erasmus University, Willem de Kooning, and Codarts, who built together so-called Rotterdam Art and Science Lab. And as you can perhaps see from the universities, there are 2 universities from the arts, one rather design and the arts or fine arts, the other more performative arts. And there is this Erasmus University, which is a quite big university and which brings in the humanities. So actually they started quite some time ago with some initiatives in this field between the arts and the sciences. So they have, for example, a double degree program where you can study humanities plus the arts and get 2 degrees on a bachelor level, but they have also a minor and so on. And actually they were looking for cooperation partners and found some others. So in Europe, so the one in Dublin, one in Budapest, one in Roskilde, Denmark, and then finally also us, Zurich University of the Arts. Perhaps structurally, it's important to mention that we are an associated partner in that project, which means that in the application, we were not kind of a full partner. Perhaps Julia can explain later a bit what exactly the reasons are for this. But obviously, from Erasmus perspective, it's a bit risky to be a full partner in these programs, because if the Swiss partner is not or is kind of criticized, the whole project can fall down. So that was one reason why we were our kind of only associated partner. In the everyday kind of business or how we are working with the partners, this doesn't make so much difference actually. And of course, we are grateful to Movetia that she helped to funding kind of our part in a very similar way as the other partners are funded. It's a 3 years project, which will be finished quite soon. Oh, I have to go to the other slide. So on the next slide, I go a little bit in the topic. So as you read perhaps from the title, the project aims at designing innovative transdisciplinary education methods. So it's really kind of this focus on education, not so much on research, in which the imaginative and transferable and so on collaborate and compose new perspectives and futures through the cooperation of arts and sciences. And this kind of arts and sciences context in combination with the term of transdisciplinarity is really kind of the crucial one. I come back to how the content and how kind of the aims are organized on a content level a bit later. But on the next slide, you see a bit how the structure is organized, which is actually a structure that is somehow given by the Erasmus Plus kind of funding scheme. So there are, in this case, it's organized in 4 subgroups, so-called intellectual outputs, so kind of working groups which take a topic out of the overall topics. It's organized in so-called transnational project meetings. So the idea was that we would meet at the different institutions, one after the other, for working phases. I will come back to this, how well this worked. In the project, there are so-called intensive study programs where we also work together with students and faculty. So it's kind of 1 week programs where some of the findings are kind of tested in kind of education context, and of course, of which we also derive further ideas. There is one multiplier event at the end, which kind of marks the finish of the project, which hasn't taken place yet. And there are some kind of boards, a management board, advisory board, not so important for the moment. Now this, the next slide is intellectual outputs, which are kind of the subgroups that work together, usually in each kind of subgroup from each institution, at least one representative is part of it. I shortly name these sub-projects. So one is about innovative transdisciplinary education methods. So kind of how do you teach in an art university context, facing also sciences, something like transdisciplinarity. I will not go too deep into the concept of transdisciplinarity, but as you see in the next slide, or yes, on the stakeholder code of conduct, it makes perhaps clear that this idea of transdisciplinarity means also that the academy or the university works together with kind of diverse contexts. So this the stakeholder.
Nein, du störst mich nicht.
So this stakeholder code of conduct is quite telling, or stakeholders have to be somehow integrated into the educational context. This can be policymakers, this can be NGOs, this can be kind of other real world contexts. And the question is a little bit, how do you bring that together with the educational needs? So this code of conduct is one of the parts. Then there is this transdisciplinary teacher program, which means that not only the students have to be educated somehow, but also the teachers. So what could be methods to bring or to convey also the findings of the project, but in a more general way to the teachers and faculty. And there is this last intellectual output transdisciplinary student program, where we kind of build a minor program. What is the curriculum as an exemplary yes, kind of curriculum. We mainly, on the next slide, you see that we mainly work in this IO1 transdisciplinary education methods. I shortly named the people working inside ZHdK for that project, which is kind of important that besides myself and Irene Vögeli, who are the leaders of this Master in Transdisciplinary Studies that is linked to the project, we also work with people from Mittelbau. So Jana Thierfelder actually graduated in the program, was teaching assistant, and it's also a possibility for her and this kind of people really to expand their network and to kind of test their own methods in such an international context, which is kind of great for them. I think the same goes for Nina Calderone, who also works on the design of the book, but in a very integrated thing. So the book, and this means one of the outcomes of that intellectual output will be a book. This is not a gardening book, which is now in the making. So the idea is really that it's a collection of methodologies, but also of case studies that the different universities have experience with or have done during their time. I don't go too deep into that. I think it's perhaps more important to learn about the basic structure. We are also, but more passively or more observing in the other IOs, but this is kind of the main work our group kind of does. So what are challenges? You asked me, Florence, to name a few. So the biggest challenge, I would say, was COVID. Unfortunately, the project started really in a wonderful way in a first transnational project meeting in Rotterdam. where we were really thrilled to also get to know the partners, to see their approaches, to learn what could be questions of mutual interest and so on. That worked incredibly well and gave a lot of energy also for the next project meeting and the starting off of the project. And then COVID came. This had a bit, kind of the consequences all following kind of national meetings couldn't take place at the universities, which is for such a project, of course, important just to see how do they work, what is the exact context and so on. And also, of course, to get to know each other better. So we had to do all the project meetings on Zoom, which incredibly slowed down kind of the process. But I think this is happily COVID is over, so this is perhaps not an important learning for the next comers. Another kind of challenge, I named it heterogeneity. It's on the one hand a challenge. I will come back to it, that it's also, of course, an opportunity. Transdisciplinarity is not the concept as perhaps other discipline, which is quite kind of fixed or clear what it is about. So these different universities have very different approaches to it, which was, of course, one of the aims to tackle that in the mutual work. So there are this term science also, where kind of art universities work with, is of course a very general term. As I said, the Rotterdam Science and Arts Labs works mainly with the humanities. We in our program work very strongly with the natural sciences. There are also approaches more from design, social design, or in the case of Roskilde, where kind of the collaborative work is more in the center and less kind of the concept of transdisciplinarity in itself. But that was exactly what was also incredibly interesting, to have this exchange and to see where are the mutual points, common points, and how to develop them. Another, if you are talking about challenges, I call it instability of partners, which because it's a 3-year project, and perhaps also COVID was a kind of strong partner of us as well. Some of the processes got quite difficult because there were some changes. So one wonderful person from Roskilde got a call from another university, left the project. Another person got maternity leave and had to leave for quite some time and so on. And especially in kind of Zoom collaborations, you really need time to build kind of a common ground. And of course, if there is a lot of change in the groups, that makes the work sometimes difficult, or again slows it down. Another thing is perhaps that these multiplier activities, which are, I think, quite important to Erasmus, but also to Movetia. So how do you disseminate the outcomes of the projects to other, let's say, universities inside Switzerland, or of course in the European context? Looking back, I think it would have been good to think earlier on this element. So we are trying to catch up this one. So what are on the next slide the benefits? I said this already, this heterogeneity was one of the most important things. This really different approaches, which had to somehow be mediated, was one of the most interesting thing, I think, of the project. How do you come together? And we really have found also interesting solution, and a big learning also in just the cooperation with the partners. Another element, of course, which is kind of somehow clear, but which I would still like to mention, is that these projects are really wonderful network kind of events, in the sense of not only for the faculty to get to know other institutions, but also for the students. In the student workshops, there are quite interesting relations, also invitations. And as I mentioned before, I think such a project can be really interesting also for younger people, I mean, Mittelbau, research assistants, teaching assistants, and so on, to be integrated in that project and just to see the wider scope of the activities. Then we had, especially at the beginning, many additional activities. So we did outside of the project, actually cooperation projects with some of the universities together. We had invitations to lecture series. We were also invitated. So it's also nice that besides the project, there was, yes, kind of a mutual interest, which also led to invitations and activities beyond the project itself. And for us also, especially at ZHdK, where we are introducing this new major-minor project, it's quite good to have wider inputs for the curriculum development. We are developing a minor in between arts and sciences. And this helps a lot, on the one hand, to have cooperation partners, but also just to see how do the others work in these contexts, and that was of really great help to us. Okay, I think, yes, I had some tips. One is on the next slide, don't invite COVID as a cooperation partner. It's not a good idea. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I keep repeating this because it really had a huge impact, and it's really a pity also that this happened, because the start was so promising, and also it went well further, but the intensity couldn't be kept up again. And then I just wrote, keep going, in the sense of we actually applied 2 times at the Erasmus. First time we were rejected, and it was we also had a wonderful feedback actually, or an interesting feedback from Erasmus, what could be ameliorated, and it really made sense to have this other round, and I think it also made the project stronger. Yes. Yeah. I think that's the main points. So.
Super. Thank you, Patrick. I think we can stop sharing slides. And no, thanks a lot. And I'm glad to hear it gave you like inspiration for the minor you have developed. I was going to ask you about that. So in a way, it has a sustainable and long-lasting impact on things we're doing at our institutions. But the floor is open. Questions, remarks, comments to Patrick or to Julia again. Don't be shy. I don't see anything. Well, in that case, maybe Julia, you can say a few words about what it is to be a full partner or an associated partner, something that Patrick.
Exactly. I noted this one. So in Erasmus Plus, let's take the example of the cooperation partnership for the moment. You can participate as full partners, meaning that you apply the same way as the others. You apply for European funding. But since Switzerland is not associated to the Erasmus Plus program, you need to convincingly show that the Swiss institution brings an essential added value, so that the project cannot or really needs this institution. As associated partner, you are also mentioned in the application, ideally, and it said what you're contributing and doing, but you're not applying for European funding. So you say that you participate with your own funds, which means that in a second step, you can indeed apply for Swiss funding at Movetia. Patrick mentioned that there is the question of the risk. So which strategy to choose? It's very nice to have access to European funding, to have a similar status as the others. Previously, it was really the case that if this argumentation was not convincingly, the whole project was rejected. 2 years ago, they changed it. So it's now possible to eject the Swiss institution from the Erasmus Plus project. So this somehow mitigated the risk for the Swiss institution. So maybe the other partners are more okay with involving a Swiss institution in the application. We are observing the cases. So if you apply well, we would be very happy to receive also your experiences, what happens to you. A first observation is, but this is really amongst us, we think that, for example, the French National Agency, they reject the Swiss institutions standardly. So every Swiss institution is rejected from the project. We hear a lot of rejections from France. Maybe it's not the case. Maybe it was really based on a solid evaluation. But I think since the project of this project type are evaluated in the national context, there are also different handlings of projects. So from this perspective, I always advise you to contact your international relations office. They might give you already some recommendation on the risks and benefits. And then also we have contacts with them, or you will also apply with this cooperation project directly at Movetia. Mm-hmm. And here I would also like to invite you to always mention your ambition of submitting a cooperation project to your international relations office, because it's very good for them to have the overview of who is working on what, exactly to give you the kind of strategic advice on the risks and benefit of different ways applying to the different programs. So please don't forget your international relations officers.
Thank you, Julia. I was going to add that the first step, whatever that is you want to apply for, is anyway to contact us. And I guess you know who exactly is in charge of that within your own institution. And what we each offer different types of services, but still guidance in the whole process is something we all standardly offer. And I remember, like for Patrick's application, I know I read over it, I gave some feedback. So we are here to support you, and yeah, we are the first door and have close contacts to Movetia. And what Patrick says is quite important. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're an associated partner or a full partner. When it comes to the project, the running of the project, it doesn't make a huge difference. And that is, I think, an important message as well. Questions now or remarks? I don't know if my colleagues from the other international offices would like to say something at that stage. If not, I don't know, Julia, do you have a question to Patrick or something that especially struck you in his presentation, because you know a wide area of projects?
No, I really like to have these kind of concrete examples to see what you can actually do in an international cooperation in education, because many of you might know international cooperation in research. I think this is an extremely helpful example also of the topics and the approaches, the risks and benefits. Maybe another thing that came into my mind, I haven't really talked about, I mean, as a funding agency, you're probably also interested on the dimension of the funding that you can receive. So Patrick, now they also changed the rules in Erasmus+. You have menus of 3 different grants for the cooperation partnerships. But maybe you can tell the others, what was the dimension of funding that you as an institution received? Now you received it from Movetia, but also maybe the others. What is an average grant? Or
yes, the average grant over this 3-year period, I think it's around, I mean, from Movetia, it was about 75,000 Swiss francs, this dimension. And it is similar, I mean, quite the same amount to the other institutions, although, which I was somehow surprised that Erasmus has kind of different funding levels. So, for example, the people from Budapest get much less, of course, with the argumentation that the costs are also less. But basically, or that seemed to me the logic of Movetia, that they just funded us in a similar sense as the others. Now we will not actually use all the funds, that I can tell you already, Julia, because these transnational meetings, of course, all these travel costs that are an important part in the funding just didn't take place. So it's also discussion, how is it possible to transfer some of the funds to other parts of the budget. So that was also a discussion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe just
have
to
a question.
Sorry.
No, go on, Julia, and then we have a question.
A short add-on. So as I said, there have been changes in the funding model at Erasmus+, and they make it more flexible as well at the European level. And we aim for the same or a similar flexibility in Switzerland. So hopefully this will facilitate your life. Just to give you also the scope of the volume of the whole project, as you mentioned, cooperation partnerships, there are a minimum of 3 institutions from 3 different Erasmus+ countries. And the maximum amount that you can ask for such a project are, I think, 420,000 euros. And on top on this comes, of course, then the Swiss contribution. So it's around 500,000 projects. That's the volume. For the international program, I don't know, Dina, whether you will talk about this, but here we were also aiming at projects of around 100,000 Swiss francs for 2 years. We even opened it up for bigger projects in the call 2020, and this is a decision for 23 that's still ongoing. But also there you can think of projects of 100,000 Swiss francs for at minimum 2 institutions, 1 Swiss, 1 abroad.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, those are important figures. We have a question from Friederike Hoch from the Teacher Education University.
Hello. Just a comment, maybe not a question. We are involved in Erasmus Plus projects as a full partner and as an associated partner. And you should just know that you get extra funding from Movetia, thank you, as an associated partner. If you're a full partner, then you have to share the budget, and then the Swiss contribution doesn't get extra funding. So, that's an important factor to keep in mind and to remind everybody of when you advise your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Friederike. Yeah, important point. I think we'll move to Dina to have enough time for her presentation and questions on her presentation. So Dina, the floor is yours.
Great. Still, you are going to share my slides, right? Or am I going to share my own?
Yeah, no, Valerie will do that for you, yeah.
Okay, while the slides are loading, maybe I introduce myself. So my name is Dina Pomeranz. I'm an economics professor at the University of Zurich. And you'll see this project is it's nice because it's a very different example of what Movetia funds. So this is on purpose, not with Europe, because we feel like there's a lot of exchange with Switzerland with Europe. But Africa is, even though people think Ukraine is close and Africa is far, it's actually the north of Africa is very close. And we feel like there is not a lot of learning from African colleagues for the Swiss education system. So this project is about leveraging African expertise for Swiss education. In the area of my research and teaching area, which is economics and related fields like public health or other quantitative social sciences. Okay, next. So we provide students from Swiss universities with the possibility to improve their intercultural skills and also to learn from the expertise and experience of, and you'll see it's kind of comprehensive, both lecturers and students and organizations. This is in part related because I do a lot of research. I'm specializing in low middle income countries. So I spend a lot of time in other countries doing research, and it was just striking to see the gap in how people have very little notion here when we're talking about our geographic neighbors and how development is there. And I think as the world gets more globalized, students are very excited about these opportunities. Next slide. So we are actually doing a lot of things. We work a lot with volunteers. 90% of the work is done by volunteers, and that's how we can do a lot of things with the money goes a long way. First we have African guest lecturers. Second, we organize internship opportunities for students from Switzerland. Third, we have remote exchange students. This is why our project has, compared to the other one, not suffered so much from COVID, because a lot of this is actually using modern technology and happens online. So we actually have exchange students who are logging in from their home and participating in class. And then we are working to attract new talent for Swiss universities, in particular graduate students in economics and related fields. And then we are this is now going to start coaching and supporting those African scholars that have been accepted to Swiss graduate programs, because the transition is sometimes not that easy. And so we also want to support people once they get here. So the African guest lectures, I'm going to share you some testimonials. So this is a political science student. As I said, it's sort of economics and related field. And who was talking about when we invite guest lecturers who are, thanks to the program in Zurich. Here's one reaction. So how it works with the guest lecturers, you have the professor or the teacher, and then you invite the guests to talk on a particular area of their expertise, and students can ask questions. And so I might teach about healthcare, and then somebody comes and shares about how they think about the study I'm presenting and how that affects people's lives, or what they think about this type of research. And students can ask anything, about their life experience, about their expertise, about how they experience the power dynamics, anything. So here Gabriele wrote, "I do not doubt that it is possible for any scholar to achieve a very high level of knowledge in any geographical context, regardless of where they come from. But a person who was born, grew up, and lived in such a context can more fully grasp its characteristics, which would be impossible for an outsider. I'm not saying that without this experience, one cannot understand or talk about Africa, but discussing Africa with someone who grew up there certainly brings something extra." So here's like a Swiss student sharing how she benefited, from having these African experts physically around in Zurich. And sometimes also we have them lecturing on Zoom. We do both. So the ones who come thanks to the grant to Switzerland, we invite them in person. Obviously, it's a bit of a richer exchange, but I had really good experience with actually having, for example, there's a Kenyan expert who I've worked with a lot on doing these randomized field experiments. She has led a lot of these studies. So then she's just from her home, zooming in. I project her large in front of the classroom, and she can see the class, and people ask questions, and we pass around the mic, and it works really well. And it's, I would say, 90% of the effect of having somebody physically here, at obviously a fraction of the cost, both in terms of her time and in terms of flying and all kinds of things. So next. So the internship opportunities, you can imagine it's like basic. I do a lot of work in developing countries and in Africa. And so I try to put organizations who can host an intern in touch with students who would like to go, because for students, when I was in college, I organized myself internships, just emailed like NGOs and stuff. But I think a lot of students don't have that courage. But if I put them in touch, so we don't give them any funding, but we help them put in touch. We do some preparation meetings, what to expect and things like that, and just facilitate them doing these internships in places where they wouldn't personally maybe have a connection otherwise. So here Leonie is one of the interns. She said she did a month at Innovation for Poverty Action, which is a research organization in Kenya. It has been very instructive to me. I learned a lot about myself, enjoyed getting to know the Kenyan culture, gaining insights into leading organization in research, experiencing working with people from a different cultural background than mine, and applying all the tips you gave us, such as ask a lot of questions, don't assume, be aware of your single story perspective and of potential power dynamics, was a defining experience. The internship was also a crucial first step to finding out and defining a little bit more what I can see myself doing with my studies. So for me personally, my internship that I did in college in Cameroon certainly has affected my research for years after. And so this was why I was passionate about, opening these opportunities for our students here, because it can really change a life's trajectory. And I'm passionate about making more linkages between Africa and Europe. Okay, next slide. The third component is these remote exchange students. So this is really new thanks to COVID. So actually has benefited that this idea came up, that we were teaching online anyway, might as well have students from other countries, right? It would have been possible before, but we never thought about it. And so now, even after COVID, we have maintained that. I try to have like not too many students, like you have like 80 students in the class, so I take about 20 remote. And now this year with Movetia, thanks to the Movetia grant, we can really spread this to teach other professors how to do it. You have to figure out a little bit the logistics, but once you set it up, it's quite easy. And so again, with passing around the mic, the students remote can hear the students in Switzerland and so on. So if we see, for example, we saw a study about Mexico, and then somebody from Mexico is in the call, and this is not Africa now, but like, you know, and can say, this is actually not how it happened. Let me tell you how I saw it on the ground. And, you know, that's so cool. So, so we are making sure that we have African remote exchange students. And here is a student. So this is actually consistently in the student feedback. People rate that super high on like how that, especially because I teach a class that this touches on international issues. But I think a lot of classes, even if it's not specifically about international issues, you know, if it's anything that you teach that's supposed to be globally relevant, then having international perspectives will certainly enrich the classroom here. And in economics, certainly, at least I'd say about half of our classes are at least about, you know, involving not just how things are here, but are supposed to be about everywhere. So here Konstantin said, it's such a different and amazing learning experience, studying issues of international economic development while having lively discussions with remote classmates who can share stories and insights from their daily firsthand experience. And so this year I piloted this in my own classroom to do it without, you know, when the students are physically in the class, not everyone on Zoom. And so now, thanks to the Movetia grant, we're going to now go, we have partnerships with other universities and also other professors within my university to teach them that and how to do it and how to set up the logistics, also how to, what we can facilitate, how they can find the remote students, right? There's a little bit of a selection process, so we can centralize that process. We try to do things that have sort of low cost and high leverage. Okay, next. This is the final one. This is actually the most difficult because now here we're talking about physical presence. And so it's these very low cost interventions are a bit more difficult. So because people have to pay application fees, the Swiss application fees, by the way, are super high. People could never afford that. It's like a month's salary for them, right? And with a low probability of getting in. So the Movetia grant allows us to pay for their application fees. There's also tests they have to do, like a thing called the GRE, and so depending on the country, they have to do, you know, the TOEFL, and these are also expensive. And we also give them training, you know, how to apply, and do you have a chance, and which program might be for you. So we have now a PhD student, for example, starting in the Graduate Institute in Geneva, and a master student also there. And then we have a PhD student at ETH, and they would have never come here. And they obviously, you know, contribute to the research here. And so here is an anonymous professor from one of our partner universities, who's saying, I'm looking forward to working with you and getting your support in selecting the right African students for our graduate program. To be honest, we had mixed experiences in the past with African students, and we found it difficult to evaluate who would be able to succeed in the Swiss educational system. If you can help us evaluate their background and credentials and provide a better matching of their qualifications to our program, we are grateful for your support, since we would love to have more African students. So this is the most hands-on part, because we start with a webinar series that's open for all African applicants who are interested in graduate studies in economics or related fields. The whole webinar gives them like, how does it work and who is qualified? So like half the people self-select out, but this is not for me. This is relatively cheap again, because online and group, you know, we have hundreds of people. And then the people who at the end of this still think, okay, I'm actually interested in doing that and going, then comes the expensive part, because now we match them one-to-one to a mentor who helps them through the application process. That's still free, but expensive to organize, like just a lot of volunteer hours. We have to match them. Right now we're matching the new generation of the first select which applicants have a chance, which mentors are qualified, and then which mentors match well with which applicant. So right now, that's what we're doing. And then when they do that and have the mentor to actually apply, then we pay for the test fees and we pay for their application fees. And this is a general request for international offices and stuff. I think it's really wrong that the Swiss universities are charging like upwards of 100 francs for people from low-income countries, where that comes out of like feeding their children or healthcare. And other universities in other countries have the opportunity to waive fees for low-income countries. And at least at the University of Zurich, I was told, look, it's the law. There's no exceptions. And I think we should change that regulation because it's completely prohibitive. None of these people could apply otherwise. So anyway, so this is the part that where we really want to have, I think is the effect is the biggest, because like Frank, for example, is now a PhD student at ETH, instead of just being once in the class as a remote guest lecturer, he shows up at all kinds of events that are related to his background. He does research together with the professor and the other PhD students here. His sort of spillovers in the educational system in Switzerland are obviously many multiple times of what a remote lecture would be, but then it also takes us more effort to do that. So that's the summary of our projects. Now we're going to go a bit to what is the questions that are more general. We can go to the next slide. Oh yeah, sorry, and I'm gonna this is Frank that I just mentioned. Just because of time, I'm gonna go quickly, but obviously it's hard to transition. And so getting support from peers who have gone through a similar process can provide really invaluable. So Frank is going to be part of the people who are now supporting the next ones who are coming. And this is the new thing that we're adding this year. Next. Okay, so cooperation. So we have done a lot of cooperations with other universities because all these things we learned, we want to now infuse it, beyond like the economics department at the University of Zurich, which is great. We are like the biggest department in that area in Switzerland, but still we're just one. And so we have so far 6 universities. You saw that one professor, for example, support them in internationalization of their teaching and educational offers, in selecting the right PhD students, been having these guest lectures and so on. And we have 5 international agreements where they help us recruit the African speakers, facilitate those internships, and attract the suitable candidates for the remote student exchange, which also has to be selected that it's the right people, and to apply to the programs. And this is where it helps, first of all, that I have a lot of international experience, but that we have this really, I think there's 20 volunteers in the team, and each of them brings their networks, and so has this ripple effect. And then 4 Swiss student associations who support the incoming African students. Next. So what are the benefits? Obviously, increased exposure to international know-how and ideas. I think Africa is sort of the most underrepresented continent. I mean, Asia depends a lot on the countries. Latin America, there's many more, but for some reason, even though Africa is the closest continent, it's the least represented. Broaden the intercultural expertise. So oftentimes African, we see them is like on posters for donating money to the poor, but we have people in the Zoom lectures who are like, the world's expert on randomized experiments management, or the world's expert on malaria. And, that's really cool for students to get, well, cognitively, African community experts too. It's very different to actually learn from an African expert. So increase the possibility for cross-cultural collaborations, because a lot of linkages are now happening, people collaborating for master's thesis and things. Enrich the classroom environment through virtual participation of African students in Swiss courses, and tackle the issue of underrepresentation. Next. So what are the challenges? So ensuring the quality of the program. As you've seen, we do a lot of things and a lot of volunteers, and we have great volunteers. Both the mentors who are more older, people who are already in graduate programs or professors, but also the people who are doing all the logistics, which tend to be more undergraduates. And so we have regular meetings with them, quality control, lots of game plans where we check off everyone did their thing. And then we have a lot of ways every year that we measure the different work packages, how many people participated, how many universities applied this. And so we do a lot of measuring. So we can also report back to Movetia. Actually, in that way, Movetia helped us, because in the application, it was a lot of questions like, how are you going to measure this? which had us think ex ante, like how are we going to measure this, and which really helps us now for the quality control. So that's really helpful. But it has to be something that you have to think ex ante. If you think ex post, oh, now I'm going to measure, then you're not going to have all the information. So we collect a lot of information from people. When they apply, they fill in things. When they go to the mentoring phase, they fill in things, and so on. And then we do regular events. That's the other thing. You have to like maintain this whole structure. Regular events to disseminate the results, discuss potential investments, improvements to the cooperation and the program. So both internally with the Swiss team, but also internationally with our partners. So that's this year, because we're going to do more this diffusion into the rest of Swiss universities, we're going to have to do a lot more of these internal within Switzerland. But we're going to do a lot of it on Zoom, like this one here, right? Like 5 years ago, we would all have to go to some event. Only half of us would have actually gone. And it's nice, so we can do all these also intra-Swiss things on Zoom. And so that's going to be nice. I think that might be my last slide. Let me check. Yes. So yeah, so I'm super grateful to Movetia for this. I mean, I had these thoughts, for a long time that somebody should and one should, and it would not have been possible without Movetia. And as you see, we try to really use the money just very targeted and have big multiplier effect. And you guys don't even know it from Movetia, but you have touched through these like hundreds of people's lives. There were 800 people in our first webinar this year from Africa who want to learn how does it even work. So there's a huge demand. And on the other side, from my students, it's the favorite thing that they always say in the teaching evaluation. So I think from both sides, there's a lot of appetite in getting to know each other. And Movetia made this possible. So I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you, Dina. That's a very ambitious project. And if I may start with one question, I mean, how long in advance, how long did it take you to plan all of this? Because that's ambition, and there are many partners and multipliers and stakeholders involved. So what would be your recommendations for someone who wanted to start a project like that? I mean, you have to start now for in 2 years, or is it quick?
It started small. So before we applied to the Movetia, before we knew about Movetia, we tried a little bit of it with 5 students from Kenya. And we just did the webinars, and then we realized, so it was 5, sorry, it was 40 students who came to the webinar and 5 ended up applying. So we already saw, okay, it's really worth it to give the information and stuff. And I started with Frank, who is now a PhD student here, right? So we started this idea a little bit small. And then thanks to Movetia, we were able to grow it a lot and to build a website and to advertise it more. And I used to teach startup entrepreneurship before I came to Switzerland at the business school, and they have this saying: you have to fix the airplane while flying. So you can imagine a lot of things went wrong in the beginning, and so we had to have a lot of meetings to see, okay, this is not working. What do we improve? This is not working. But I would say, like, gradually. So another thing about startup entrepreneurship is you want to, instead of having a big plan and then do everything at once, you want to do little steps and fail often and early. So we did a little bit, that doesn't work, we fix it, and then, oh, this is a good idea, we add this. This is a good idea, we add it, and this is the second round from Movetia we got. So we had a smaller one that we started, and then that we fixed those things. And now this year, like, we got a second one, we're going to roll it out to other Swiss universities. So the first one was much more local between Zurich and ETH, and a little bit the graduate center in Geneva. And now we're going to roll it out to other Swiss universities. So I'd say don't do everything at once. Don't plan everything out on the board and then start. Mm-hmm. But talk all the time about how to ongoingly improve it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now we have 2 questions. First, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for this inspirational presentation. One question, you gave a lot of examples, several examples from Kenya.
Yeah.
So in Kenya, communicating in English with university students is probably not usually a problem. No, but yeah. Okay, so depending on the system, I suppose some of the systems are Francophone.
Yes.
Some of them use Portuguese, some use Arabic, I suppose. But is it, does the language become become difficult, become an obstacle depending on the country, or you can always adapt?
So since these are people who want to come to Switzerland to guest lecture or do a studies, it has to be a language that is taught here. So far, because we haven't done that much for French and Italian, well, in the Italian university, economics is actually mostly taught also in English. So it would be, well, this year we might want to add is which is a good question that you're saying. See, this is kind of exactly how we gradually like add things. So far, it's been Zurich and Italian speaking, the graduate institute engineer, it's also in English. So if they want to come, they have to speak English anyway. So we have people from Francophone countries, but they know enough English to follow along. Now, we could now have people who want to go, for example, to Lausanne or University of Geneva, and it's not required for them to speak English. So what we might want to add now is to actually have the webinars in French, because there's a point to that, because you can come with speaking French. But I don't think we need to, for the Swiss system, we don't need to offer it in Portuguese or Arabic, because there's no degree that you can actually do with those languages. So it selects for the people who know that language. But that's actually a great suggestion. Now, thanks to your point, we might actually add a French webinar series. That's a great suggestion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Friederike?
Yeah, thank you for this inspiring presentation. I think really Africa is underrepresented in that respect a lot. I have a question. How do you plan to disseminate your program to other universities, in which fields, and do you stay within economics, or do you stay with Africa? So what's your strategy there and the follow-up plans? Thank you.
Great, thanks for that question. So exactly, so to Florence's earlier question, we can also choose which direction we now grow next. We don't want to grow in all dimensions. So right now, what we want to do is disseminate what we're doing to all the Swiss universities within economics and related fields, sort of quantitative social sciences, but across the whole of Switzerland. And I think for now we're staying with Africa also because I think, as you said, it's the most underrepresented continent. We may consider in future to open to all low and lower middle income countries. It's not like, for example, in Latin America, there's lots of countries that have a lot of resources already. So it wouldn't be all non-OECD countries, but that it's more for the future. So I think the current step is having webinars like this where we exchange with other colleagues. And it's also the easiest for me because I know kind of all the other economics professors in Switzerland, to disseminate within my area to the rest of the country. And then I think the next step after that would probably be within Switzerland, within Africa, but other fields. The medical field is actually the best in general in the global health. They're doing the best in terms of African representation from all fields, but still I think there's a lot of scope there. But also ETH is very interested in doing things with the engineers and so on. So I could imagine in the future, the next step after the current might be other fields. The current step that we're doing is other universities. However, if you're in another field and you're like, I just want to do a component of this, like the remote students, for example, that's like relatively easy to organize. Send me an email, hop on a call with you. I can explain to you how to do it. I can help you find the students. I think the remote students, we could easily add it to other fields like right now. So just let me know. I'm happy to help with anything like that.
Thank you.
And like when I say like just to be clear, I'm a tenure track research economist. So I mostly do research and teaching. So it's a huge, amazing team. The undergrads love working on this, and I just have to make really sure that, the people who manage things and just quality control. So I'm like, I come in when there's a fire, but the team is doing an amazing job. I just want to really acknowledge the team. Like, that's how this is all possible.
Thanks. Julia, is there anything you'd like to comment on, or do you have questions from the side of Movetia?
I think here again, it was very helpful to have this project example, and I think you nicely explained on how you take back from your international collaboration to Switzerland, and exactly this part of sharing with others should be greatly beneficial to the whole Swiss system. No, I think else, no additions, comments.
So I just want to really thank you guys. Like this would not have happened. I mean, now we are also, it's working a bit better, and so it gets in some visibility. But it would, like, it's so amazing that in Switzerland we have this possibility. And thank you so much, you know, for allowing that. And you know, all the volunteers also, like, they are helping, but they're also Swiss students who are getting a lot of experience out of this. And so I'm, you know, I can send you more quotes like when I posted, like, in the name of all the people you touched with this funding, I just want to say, like, it's amazing. And thank you so much. And
it's good to know we can reach out to you if we have more questions on its support.
Please,
I think
anyone.
I dare to say that the same applies for Patrick and his project. So if you want more information or more insights on how it has worked, you can reach out to Patrick. And anyway, this Zoom will be is recorded and will be put on the website for others.
I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anyone wants to email me, if you want to replicate any component of this in your field, I'll be thrilled to share.
Super, thank you. I think we've come to the last part, which is kind of a wrap up and agreeing on what is the most important to take back home. And I guess there might be 3 points that are really obvious at the end of the day, but it's good to restate them. So there are very relevant funding opportunities available through Movetia, be it a participation in a cooperation project of Erasmus Plus or participating in the international programs, different settings, but both very relevant for us higher education institutions. We, the international offices of our respective institutions, are the first door to come in if you want advice on what to do exactly, how, and so please knock on our doors if you have ideas. Or reversely, I just had an idea now for one project I know is running in our school that could be really made for the international program. So I'll try to motivate him to hand in something for next year. So yes, we're here to support you in any way you actually need. I mean, not everyone needs the same type of guidance and support. And then we will hear more about the exact modalities for the applications of next year on the 24th of November. Is that correct, Julia?
Still needs to be confirmed, but yes, this is the plan. And for the international program, we actually for both, we don't think that there are huge changes. So in line with what we had this year, but there will certainly be smaller adaptations. The funding model I already mentioned for the Erasmus Plus participations.
So basically, bottom line, if you have a project ID, start now already and attend the event on the 24th of November to make sure that what you've planned is actually in line with the criteria. But I think it's important to know it won't change much. So this is a good point for all of us. Yeah, I think that would be the wrap up. But then, like I said, I mean, this whole event actually is taking place because of the Zürcher Fachhochschule, which is a construct that will soon disappear, and that is good because we are all accredited now, and we don't need that construct anymore. But however, we have this informal exchange group actually under the umbrella of the Zürcher Fachhochschule, and we've added ETH and the University of Zurich because we thought if we're going to exchange, we also have to have the University of Zurich and the ETH Zurich around the table. And then we've discussed cooperation projects of Erasmus Plus and of Movetia, and came up with the idea to actually have a small event on that. So this is part of a regular exchange we have on our activities. Normally only the international offices. Now, of course, it's with all of you in the room. So in that sense, I'd like to give the word to my colleagues from the other international offices in case they'd like to share something from their sides. And if you don't, it's fine as well. I mean, I guess the exchange just continues. Really nothing, just making sure. Yeah, Friederike.
Well, thank you for organizing this, Florence. I think you did a great effort to put this all together. So, you know, I think it's important that we know who is there in the team so that we can kind of, you know, make ourselves known to our colleagues. And also in our case, in PH Zurich, it's also the research team. So we work closely together. So this is a collaboration also among us, and, you know, just the doors are open, contact us. And it's nice to know that we can work together across fields. And, you know, the transdisciplinary project was also a nice example of showing that we can work together in different fields also. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Friederike. It's important to mention exactly, we're all very different animals. I mean, between us, ZHdK, you teacher education, the University of Zurich, ZHdK, but like you say, we can also actually join forces in that type of projects. And I mean,
maybe from my side also, thank you very much. As far as I saw, there were at one time almost 60 participants, which is great. This is the first time that we have done such kind of an event for, let's say, a region, a closed group. Normally we do open information events. So this was also a test for us, and happy to get your feedback, whether this was helpful or not. We will definitely think of whether we should offer this also for other regions of Switzerland. I think the timing is very good to start now, even though we don't have all the details ready, but you know the big lines.
No, thank you, Julia, and thanks for your openness to actually pilot this, because exactly like you say, normally you don't do that. So I mean, I think it has brought something. We will give you a more detailed feedback once we've met again, and yeah, good if you do that in other regions. I think they will probably be happy. Anyway, I think we all need a coffee or whatever can help us make it through the day before the summer break. So in that sense, we'll stop the webinar and make a follow-up. I'll share the link with all of you, I mean, via the international offices of where we put it on the website, so you can forward it further to your colleagues within the institutions. Thank you so much, Julia, Dina, and Patrick. Thank you to the audience, and see you after summer. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.